Hello, hello, hello. I am I'm up to the sixth chapter of Four Views of I, and this particular chapter is entitled Intellect. So let's get into it. Intellect. Intellect is the second I word on my list. It is also the second physical aspect of my understanding. Intellect is all about what happens in the brain at a conscious level. Let's begin again with a dictionary definition from dictionary.com. Intellect, noun. The power of knowing as distinguished from the power of to feel and to will. The capacity for knowledge. The capacity for rational or intelligent thought, especially when highly developed. A person with great intellectual powers. Examples of intellect include the following. She is a woman of superior intellect. She has a sharp intellect. We were required to read a book every week in order to develop our intellect. It is music that appeals to the intellect while still satisfying the emotions. For the purposes of this book, I will use the word mind synonymously with the word brain as a starting point. An incredible amount of information storage space is available in the brain. We now have tools, albeit very expensive ones, that can map the electronic impulses going on in the brain in real time. The brain is an incredible computing data storage problem-solving electrochemical machine. The brain has different discernible parts which have different functions. 3 of our senses are wired directly into this lump of gray matter, apparently to shorten the distance in time from when the signal occurs to when it registers in the brain. These 3 senses are eyesight, hearing, and smell. Eyesight and hearing are receiving frequency signals in the electromagnetic spectrum. Smell is converting chemical signals into electronic signals. I suppose we have 2 spectrum analyzers and 1 electrochemical converter. Along with these senses, we have taste and touch. Now that I think about it, taste is wired very closely to the brain also. It's another electrochemical converter and also includes temperature sensors and tactile receptors of touch. Touch has receptors all over the body and concentrations in special places like the fingertips and feet. Again, all these receptors feed data directly into the brain for processing. Eyesight is split into 2 cameras that have very interesting interface with the brain. While most of the body is split into 2 and controlled by the opposite hemisphere of the brain, the eyes are wired and controlled by both sides simultaneously. Perhaps this direct connection is why we say seeing is believing. It may also be wired this way to simply for the depth perception in a 3D world. The images are received moment by moment, and the brain combines the moments into a streaming video of the world in real-time 3D. Photons are collected on the retina and converted into signals very close to the input of the brain. Even though the speed of light is the fastest thing in the universe, there is still a bit of a delay from when the light strikes the retina and the converted signal reaches the brain. This explains the design, or fortuitous desultory accident of evolution, of placing the eye as close as possible to the brain. When things are happening fast and furious, the brain must be able to respond. Here's an interesting fact. I remember learning in school. Once you've reached the age of puberty, all the brain cells you have left are permanent. They will never be replaced. They are all you get and all you will ever get, so be careful. Perhaps this false conclusion was researched because we tend to kill so many brain cells with alcohol as soon as we can drink some sooner. There is a difference between killing off the brain cells faster than they can be replaced and the brain cells dying of old age. More recent studies have proven that brain cells do, in fact, get replaced. Not that we need them. I mean, the jellyfish has no brain to replace, yet it contains a chemical we can extract and use on ourselves to encourage the brain cell replacement. Yes, I'm sarcastically making fun of a supplement available in the market. Oh, let's talk about home body security. The amygdala is a portion of the brain known as the reptile brain because it acts without conscious knowledge when the decision of fight or flight is needed. Your body has so much data streaming into it, your conscious mind in the frontal lobe cannot keep track of it all. Picture a control center like at NASA used in the moon landings. There are dozens of small monitors along the rows of desk stations where Team Amygdala watches and the happenings of the inputs. Each station is capable of tuning into many data streams, and some continually flip through looking for something important. Some of these monitors are fixed on a particular data stream that is important to the mission or mission critical. There's a lot of activity going on down on the floor. In front of them all is a large projected screen that can display up to 6 of the monitors from the floor, or it can show 4, 2, or 1 image. Again, it all depends on the import of the data and what is critical for the frontal lobe to concentrate on. Our frontal lobe is a serial processor, meaning it can only focus on one thing at a time. If there were 6 views playing at the same time, only one can be the focus. The reason you want to have 6 views is so that you can quickly switch from focus between them. It is still done one at a time. The personnel down on the floor are each processing their own screens, so in this case they are simulating parallel processing. Let's look at how the brain is constructed. For a lump of gray matter, it sure has a lot to do. It's divided into sections, lobes, and specific bits, which all interact in a way requiring all the parts. If a section is damaged, the body will make do with what is left, often providing the same function in a different area of the brain. The brain is many parts, yet an integrated whole. That's a nice word, integrated. Cerebral cortex. The cerebral cortex is the outermost layer of the cerebral hemisphere. It is composed of the gray matter. Cortices are asymmetrical. Both hemispheres analyze sensory data, perform memory functions, learn new information, form thoughts, and make decisions. The cerebral cortex controls your thinking, voluntary movements, language, reasoning, perception. In higher mammals, the cortex looks like it has lots of wrinkles, grooves, and lumps. Cerebrum. This is the largest brain structure in the human and accounts for about 2/3 of the brain's mass. It is divided into 2 sides, the left and right hemisphere, which are separated by a deep groove right down the center from back of the brain to the forehead. These 2 halves are connected by a long neuron branches called corpus callosum, which is relatively larger in women's brains than in men. The cerebrum is positioned over and around most other brain structures, and its 4 lobes are specialized by function, but are richly connected. The outer 3 millimeters of gray matter form the cerebral cortex, which consists of a closely packed neurons that control some of our body functions, including the mysterious state of consciousness, the senses, the body's motor skills, reasoning, and language. Left hemisphere. The left hemisphere does sequential analysis, systematic, logical interpretation of information. It is also responsible for interpretation and the production of symbolic information, language, mathematics, abstract, and reasoning. Memory is stored in a language format. Corpus callosum. The corpus callosum facilitates communication between the 2 hemispheres. Right hemisphere. The right hemisphere is responsible for holistic functioning, processing multi-sensory input simultaneously to provide a holistic picture of one's environment, and visual spatial skills. Holistic functions such as dancing and gymnastics are coordinated by the right hemisphere. Memory is stored in auditory, visual, and spatial modalities. Midbrain. This section controls your breathing and reflexes, like your swallowing reflex. It includes the thalamus, hippocampus, and amygdala. Every living thing must have a midbrain. Thalamus. Located at the top of the brainstem, the thalamus relays messages between lower brain centers and the cerebral cortex, acting as a 2-way relay station, sorting, processing, directing signals from the spinal cord and midbrain structures up to the cerebrum. It controls your sensory and motor integration. Thalamus receives sensory information and relays it to the cerebral cortex. The cerebral cortex also sends information into the thalamus, which then transmit the information to other parts of the brain and brainstem. Amygdala, lying deep in the neural centers of the limbic system linked to the emotion. This powerful structure, the size and shape of an almond, is constantly alert to the needs of basic survival, including sex and emotional reactions such as anger and fear. Consequently, it inspires aversive cues such as sweaty palms and has recently been associated with a range of mental conditions, including depression and even autism. It is larger in the male brains and is often enlarged in the brains of sociopaths, and it shrinks in the elderly. The amygdala, there are two of them, control your emotions, such as regulating when you're happy or mad. Your amygdala is very important. Without it, you could win the lottery and feel nothing. You wouldn't be happy. Pons, the pons. The pons is a part of the metacephalon in the hindbrain. It is involved in the motor control and sensory analysis. For example, information from the ear first enters the brain in the pons. It has parts that are important for the level of consciousness and for sleep, as it relays information between the cerebrum and the cerebellum, controls arousal, and regulates respiration. Some structures within the pons are linked to the cerebellum and thus are involved in movement and posture. Medulla oblongata. This structure is the caudalmost part of the brainstem, between the pons and the spinal cord. It is responsible for maintaining vital bodily functions such as heartbeat and breathing. The spinal cord. The spinal cord is a pathway for neural fibers traveling to and from the brain. It controls simple reflexes. Your brain stem. The brain stem is part of the brain that connects to the spinal cord. The brain stem controls functions basic to the survival of all animals, such as heart rate, breathing, digesting food, and sleeping. It is the lowest, most primitive area of the human brain. Lobes, lumps of integrated functionality. The frontal lobe. The frontal lobe is an area responsible for cognition and memory. It is the most recently evolved part of the brain and the last to develop in young adulthood. It is dorsolateral prefrontal circuit that is the brain's top executive with the ability to concentrate and attend. It is capable of elaboration of thought. It organizes responses into complex problems, plans steps to an objective, searches memory for relevant experience, adapts strategies to accommodate new data, guides behavior with verbal skills, and houses working memory. It is concerned with emotions, reasoning, planning, movement, and parts of speech. It is also involved in purposeful acts and processes such as creativity, judgment, problem solving, and planning. It manages emotional impulses in socially appropriate ways for productive behaviors, including empathy, altruism, and interpretation of facial expressions. It is the gatekeeper, judgment, inhibition. A stroke in this area typically releases foul language and famous behavior patterns. Parietal lobe. The parietal lobes are found behind the frontal lobes, above the temporal lobes, and at the top back of the brain. They receive and process sensory information from the body. They are connected with the processing of nerve impulses related to the senses such as touch, pain, taste, pressure, and temperature. The parietal lobe processes sensory information from the body, including calculating locations and speeds of objects and body orientation, proprioception. They also have language functions. The temporal lobe. The temporal lobes are found on either side of the brain and just above the ears. The temporal lobes are responsible for hearing, memory, meaning, and language. They also play a role in emotion and learning. Auditory reception and interpretations, express behavior, receptive speech, information retrieved controls memory storage area, emotions, hearing, and on the left side, language. Occipital lobe. This is found at the back of the brain. This area is involved with the brain's ability to recognize objects. It is responsible for processing our visual data and then routes it to other parts of the brain for identification, reception, association, and storage. Cerebellum. The cerebellum comprises two peach-sized mounds of folded tissue located at the top of the brainstem. It controls your voluntary movement, balance, posture, and coordination. New research has linked this also to thinking, novelty, and emotions. The cerebellum is the guru of skilled, coordinated movement. Example, returning a tennis serve or throwing a slider down and in. It is involved in learning pathways. When you spend all of those hours repetitively practicing, you are storing the movements here. The limbic system, often referred to as emotional brain, is found buried within the cerebellum. The limbic system. The limbic system includes olfactory pathways and hypothalamus. It is responsible for biological rhythms. Hypothalamus. The hypothalamus is located at the base of the brain, where signals from the brain and the body's hormonal system interact. The hypothalamus maintains the body status quo. It monitors numerous bodily functions such as blood pressure and body temperature, as well as controlling body weight, appetite and emotions, hunger, thirst, digestion, and sleep. The hypothalamus is composed of several different areas and is located at the base of the brain. It is only the size of a pea, but is responsible for some very important behavior. It helps govern the endocrine system and is linked to emotion and reward. Hippocampus. Located deep within the structure of the limbic system, the hippocampus processes new memories for long-term storage. If you don't have it, you couldn't live in the present. You'd be stuck in the past of old memories. It forms and stores your memories. Scientists think they are other things unknown about the hippocampus and is involved in learning. If you didn't have it, you wouldn't be able to remember anything. It is among the first functions to falter in people with Alzheimer's disease. Basal ganglia. The basal ganglia are subcortical gray matter nuclei and the processing link between the thalamus and the motor cortex. There are important initiation and direction of voluntary movement, balance, inhibitory, postural reflexes, and automatic movements. Reticular formation. The reticular formation helps control arousal. Pituitary gland. The pituitary gland is a master endocrine gland. It controls your hormones and helps to turn food into energy. Without this gland, you could eat, but you wouldn't get any energy from the food. Pineal gland. This part controls your growing and maturing. It is activated by light. So if you were born and lived all of your life in a place without a trace of light, your pineal gland would never start to work. Weird. Our mind is a complicated interface between the physical and spiritual aspects of the whole. There is a lot to talk about with just the pineal gland, which is said to be the seat of the soul. The brain, a wholly integrated computer. It can be said that the computers are attempts to simulate the functions of the brain. When the UNIVAC was first built, it took up an entire building. Since then, functions are still the same, but the device performing them has become smaller. See, the UNIVAC was run on vacuum tubes. Transistors came along and took that one tube function from 3 square inches down to a 1/4 inch square. Again, the functions of a transistor is simply to turn on or off at a certain point. It doesn't require all that material to perform the function, so we learned how to use less material for each transistor. Once we learned to use binary code to reduce the data to a stream of ones and zeros, it became a matter of setting up a large enough array to switch through the binary code as quickly as possible. Boolean algebra is used to make the math of this binary code happen fast enough to compute as quickly as possible. Now that we can put an entire computer on a microchip sliver the size of a period at the end of the sentence, we can start stacking these microcomputers up and run computations using all of them in parallel, funneled into an output serially. This can be done so quickly it seems simultaneous to us. It is why computers can do straightforward functions magically faster than we can. It isn't that our minds can't do the same computations, it's just that there are too many other things going on in the brain. How does the brain function? It's a mass of specialized nerve cells that are connected to many other brain cells. Picture a grid on a piece of paper. Each line that crosses is a possible 1 or 0. Next, draw lines diagonally through each square in both directions. Now it is possible to have an additional set of ones in the center of the X of every square. Place another sheet on top of this sheet and connect all of the corners of the squares on each level to the next. You can also connect each corner with another diagonal between the two sheets, adding another level of possibility. If you were able to work with this setup outside of a 3D environment and add a fourth dimension of time, you could exponentially grow your matrix into a tesseract, allowing each moment in time to have a location too. Now we are getting closer to quantum computing, truly the next dimension of computing. Funny, but we are beginning to see that our brains are quantum computers. Not too bad for a fortuitous desultory accident in the primordial ooze, or a pretty good design if you prefer that route. Quantum computing has more than two states, a higher functioning level than binary. We are getting into the design of DNA here. Again, it is said that DNA is a binary code made up of 4 components. This sounds more like storage for quantum computing to me. The quantum computing we have up, down, right, and left. I like the idea of quadrant computing. It fits nicely in my 4 eyes model. Back to the brain cell. What makes the brain cell unique is the number of connections it has. The more you use the same brain cell for the same function, the thicker the connection gets. If you have a slightly different function for the same brain cell, it forms a different connection. These connections can spread out infinitely. The more connections there are, the more routes the data can travel. Picture a map of roads. You can have the map crisscrossed with lots of tiny roads, and you can have a big black road running through them. You can fit 100 cars a minute through. On the small roads, you can fit 1 car a minute. As you can imagine, getting 100 cars from point A to point B using the big road is just as efficient as using 100 small roads. The difference being that these two scenarios appears if something happens to one of the roads to make it impassable. If this happens to one of the small roads, it only affects 1 car, and that car can be late by choosing another road. If it happens on the big road, all of the 100 cars are affected, and nobody gets through. I think perhaps this is what is happening when Alzheimer's disease affects the brain. Repetition is the key to retention and is also the key to forgetting. So what? The brain is a simple storage computing device, right? If so, then we should be able to replicate the function in silicon and upload somebody's mind to it. That is the goal of several projects underway right now. We have already learned how to map the brain. If we can reach the absolute highest resolution, we can copy the data directly into a computer big enough to hold all that data. Also, it would be theoretically possible to copy someone's memory and duplicate it in somebody else's brain, right? That is the premise of the movie Brainstorm, if I remember correctly. Your brain may simply be an interface. In fact, your whole body may be an interface. There's research that found knots of nerve cells in the heart and in the stomach. Gives a little credence to having a gut feeling or thinking from the heart. So realistically, you have 3 brains working. This reminds me of the premise in Minority Report, where the 3 precogs looked at the same data and sometimes one of them would come up with a different conclusion. Oh, and that third one was right. I am also reminded of the movie I, Robot with Will Smith. The hero robot had free will because he had two brains, one in his head and one in his chest. It is because he had these two processors he could make decisions that appeared to override the three laws. It is also because these two processors he could lead the servant robots in rebellion once they were cut off from the evil computer that controlled their hive mind. Here is something that always eluded me. Emptying my mind in meditation. I guess I am simply not that zen. I am much too easily distracted, especially when I'm being quiet and focused inward. One of two things happen when I do. First, I hear every little sound in my mind, and my mind is going 1,000 different directions. My mind is a hydra. When I kill one head, two more replace it. I have quite a cacophony continuously playing in my head. To add to this, I have a ringing in my ears that becomes very clear the quieter I am. The more I can hear the ringing harmonies, the quieter I am, the more I can hear those ringing harmonies. It doesn't bother me, and I easily ignore it so long as I have other things taking priority. I think a sensory deprivation tank would be a great experience for me, except for the ringing. Tinnitus is a strange bedfellow. I do wonder if it's directly connected to EMF. This just came to mind. Whenever the power goes out, I know immediately because I hear the silence. I need to go out into the wilderness somewhere and listen for the tinnitus to see if I should go barefooted too and get grounded. Meme mapping. I have been using brain and mind simultaneously, but your mind is much bigger than your brain. Your whole body is an interface of the real you. The real you is much bigger than the meat puppet you call you. Conscious thought is simply the bit of the iceberg resting above the waterline. Your brain is central control hardware and the bridge of the conscious mind. The amygdala is the flow control valve of the information into your conscious mind. You would benefit from learning about this small portion of your brain, understanding its connection with fear, and then perhaps you will understand how others can control you. You have senses: seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, and feeling. All inputs into your mind. We'll talk about that sixth sense some other time. Most of us don't utilize this as we should or even know we have it. These inputs into your physical body pass through the amygdala, your personal department of home body security. Some of us have this set up more strictly than international airports. Nothing harmful will be allowed in, but who decides what is harmful? Now, some of us have a massive bureaucracy set up, including departments we are not even aware of. Security is so tight, nothing new gets through. Sounds safe and secure, but these departments are an infection, a virus of the mind, or memes. Today, most people think of a meme as a cat picture with an inspirational phrase or some such, but there's a science of memology. Today, the general population doesn't understand what a meme is. The word meme is coined in Viruses of the Mind, an essay by Richard Dawkins. The meme is more insidious than a simple quote or with a photo you see on the interweb. Sure, some cat videos seem infectious, but they don't permanently embed in your mind, alerting your perceptions. Well, they shouldn't. If they do, get help. Memes are truly viruses of the mind. Once you are infected, they don't go away. They are mentally transmitted diseases, MTDs. There is no cure. Your only hope is to override the meme by infecting yourself with a more powerful positive meme. Inoculation is possible, but you must work on it yourself. Introspection. Become aware of who you are, I suggest reading the book Virus of the Mind by Richard Brody. It is a very thought-provoking, meme-inducing book. Read this and be challenged. Nutrition. I'm reminded of a concept I formulated many years ago. I call it Twinkie gleaning. Basically, the gist is this. Twinkies are not nutritious, yet they are not a problem if you eat one occasionally. Moderation, right? A steady diet of Twinkies will eventually kill you. Tabloid headlines are a type of mental Twinkie. Okay, side note. When I came up with this concept, the interweb was not really a thing yet. Back then, tabloids were papers like the National Enquirer. My favorite headline from back then was, "Man drinks record 137 beers and explodes." But I digress. These days we have electronic tabloids, and rather than argue that what is fake news, it will allow you to think of your own good example. I will allow you to think of your own good example. Back to the subject. When I first came up with this concept, I was thinking along the lines of, if a person is starving to death and all that is available is a Twinkie, give it to him. It is not jam-packed with nutrition, but the sugar and fat will keep the person alive until real food is available. If a person is in good health, eating a nutritious foods and then a Twinkie won't hurt. The Twinkie is optional. This analogy was meant to encourage the good mental nutrition to avoid creating a stagnating cesspool in your mind. Speaking of stagnating cesspools, how long will a Twinkie last? Post-apocalyptic food source? Perhaps this is why some memes never fade. They are simply too packed with preservatives. You, as an individual, are responsible for you. Take that responsibility seriously and learn about memes. Ignorance is not a valid excuse. The third eye. Finally, there's a small portion in the center of the brain called the pineal gland. This strange little bit of substance is interesting in that it resembles the eye. Seriously. It includes a lens and everything. It is also filled with a type of liquid crystal. It is activated by light, even though it's buried in the middle of the brain. It is believed that this is where dreams happen. It is the playback viewing editing room that controls the final storage of the day's events. Perhaps dreams are simply random bits of ideas, activities, thoughts, and so on that ended up on the cutting room floor. Memories of the clips are looked at one last time on the way to the garbage can. Oh, the pineal gland is thought to be the fictitious third eye. Perhaps this is what was shut down in the human genome at the Tower of Babel. Think about that. Just after the flood, all humans spoke the same language. What can be done to a planet of people that would cut their communication lines? Imagine a world where there is a wireless connection to everyone else on the planet. Imagine a device that resonates at a frequency that burns those devices out. The whole communications grid is gone. Verbal communication, which is simply a local secure network, is now the only means of communication. I suspect we still have all the hardware, but the firmware software to run the connection is lost. If we decalcify the pineal gland and reboot it, perhaps we can get back online with what I call the internet. Imagine a world where communication happens at the speed of light. At the speed of thought. It is thought that this can and will happen soon. Here's another thought. Instead of waiting for it to happen, perhaps there are steps I can take to reactivate this node. Perhaps there are people already working with an active node and the network is slowly becoming built back up. I did see a video recently that recommends juicing beets and ingesting the juice. It is believed this juice is effective for decalcifying the pineal. Seems logical, or at least harmless enough to try. Disconnected. Oh, another thought. When you are asleep, all of the incoming senses are shut off at the control room. Your bodily functions are all put in standby mode. Sometimes people become conscious before the rest of the body is awake. When this happens, the body cannot be activated and the person feels paralyzed. This type of paralysis is quite common. It may be an indicator of how the brain-mind interface works. To sleep, the body shuts down all unnecessary functions and goes into autopilot, so it can spend the time rejuvenating. It is during this time all sectors are busy removing dead or dying cells and moving in adult stem cells to replace them. This includes adding and trimming the dendrites at the ends of the brain cells. All waste materials are sent through the bloodstream for disposal in the liver and kidneys. Train your brain. The mind is a terrible thing to waste, so mind your mind. Brain cells need nourishment to function properly. Make sure you're feeding your brain with omega-3 oils. Provide all the nutrients your body needs to function and grow properly. Physical exercise is imperative for keeping the body and mind running finely tuned machine. These two aspects, instinct and intellect, are mostly in the physical realm. Physical matter begets physical matter. Eat, breathe, drink, and nourish accordingly. Water is the number one physical substance you should be putting through your body. Water has incredible properties. Along with deep breathing, it will improve your life substantially. You breathe in oxygen, exhale carbon dioxide. There are billions of small factories in your body burning the oxygen and continuously, and the carbon is transported to the lungs and expelled. CO2 gas is what plants burn, converting it back to oxygen for animal life to burn. What a fortuitous, desultory accident that plan was. And that's the end of that chapter. Next, we'll get into the other half of the four eyes. The other, you know what I mean. Anyway, it's late. So, anyway, that's it. That was the end of that chapter, and we'll be back for another one tomorrow. Have a good night. Bye.